Please, do not take me back. The words left Claire Bennett before she had even caught her breath. She had been running for what felt like miles, though the white dress tangled around her legs made every 100 feet feel longer. Branches had pulled loose strands of her light brown hair from their pins, mud darkened the hem of the dress, and one shoe was missing somewhere behind her in the black pine forest. She did not stop to look for it. Voices still carried faintly through the trees. Men from Silver Creek were searching, calling her name, telling her to come home, as though home were the place she had just escaped. Claire turned to look over her shoulder one more time and ran straight into someone. Strong hands caught her by the arms before she hit the ground. She gasped and pulled away immediately. The stranger released her just as quickly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark traveling coat damp with mist, with black hair and gray eyes that seemed almost silver in the moonlight. He looked at her torn dress, her bare foot, and the fear she had failed to hide. Please, Claire said again, quieter this time. Whatever you do not take me back. The man glanced toward the distant voices. I was not planning to. Claire stared at him. Most alphas asked questions like commands. Who are you? Which pack? Who gave you permission to be here? This man asked nothing. He simply stepped slightly to the side, leaving the path behind him open. You can keep running, he said, or there is an old ranger cabin about half a mile east. Claire did not move. Why would you help me? His expression barely changed. Because you asked me not to take you back. The answer was so simple it made her suspicious. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a branch cracked. Claire flinched. The stranger noticed. They are getting closer. She looked toward the darkness, then back at him. Every instinct told her not to follow an unknown alpha into the woods. But every memory of the house she had left told her going back was worse. The cabin, she said. Show me. He nodded once. No smile. No triumph. Just acceptance. This way. He walked beside her rather than in front, slowing when she struggled over roots and never reaching for her unless she nearly lost her balance. Claire noticed that, too. The forest thinned after several minutes, revealing a small, weathered cabin beneath towering pines. The stranger opened the door and stepped back. You first. Claire hesitated at the threshold. Warm air and the smell of old cedar waited inside. She looked at him. What is your name? For the first time, he seemed to choose his answer carefully. Rowan. Just Rowan? A faint shadow of amusement touched his face. For tonight. Claire should have been more afraid of that answer. Instead, for the first time since she began running, she felt something dangerously close to relief. She stepped inside. Rowan followed only after she moved away from the door. Outside, the voices passed somewhere in the distance without finding them. Inside, Claire stood in a ruined white dress, breathing slowly, while the stranger quietly lit the fire. She had no idea that she had just asked the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories to help her disappear. Only a few hours earlier, Claire had been standing in front of a bedroom mirror while 3 women adjusted the white dress around her, as though the most important thing about the evening was making sure every fold fell perfectly. Silver Creek Pack had filled the Bennett house with flowers, candles, polished glasses, and people who kept telling her how fortunate she was. Gavin Mercer was powerful. His family owned land, businesses, and enough influence to erase the debt that had followed Claire's parents for years. Everyone spoke about the arrangement as though it were a blessing wrapped in expensive fabric. Claire stood still while her mother fastened a small silver clasp at the back of her dress. You look beautiful, she said softly. Claire met her reflection. I look like someone who already agreed. Her mother paused. Claire, I never said yes. The room became quieter. One of the women near the window suddenly became very interested in rearranging a vase. Her mother lowered her hands. Sometimes life does not give us every choice we want. Claire turned. This is not choosing between 2 dresses. I know. Then why does everyone keep acting like it is? Her mother's face tightened with exhaustion. The past 2 years had been difficult. Medical bills after Claire's father's illness. A failed harvest. Loans that became larger every winter. Gavin's proposal had arrived at exactly the moment desperation made almost anything look generous. He can give you security, her mother said. Claire looked toward the window, where evening light faded behind the trees. What about choice? No one answered. That silence stayed with her through dinner, through the arrival of guests, and through every smiling person who touched her arm and told her how lucky she was. Lucky to be chosen by an alpha. Lucky that Gavin wanted an omega from an ordinary family. Lucky that her parents would never have to worry about money again. Claire smiled because everyone expected her to. Inside, something kept asking the same question. If this was such good fortune, why did it feel like a door closing? She found Gavin later near the back hall, speaking with two men from his family. Claire had not meant to listen. She was only looking for somewhere quiet enough to breathe. Then she heard her own name. She is nervous, one man said. Gavin gave a small laugh. She thinks too much. Claire stopped behind the half-closed door. That can be corrected, the other man replied. Gavin's voice remained calm. Casual. Certain. Once the bond is announced, she will settle down. She will learn what is expected. Claire felt cold despite the warmth of the house. It was not anger in his voice that frightened her. It was confidence. The absolute belief that her questions were temporary problems and her future was already settled. She stepped backward before anyone saw her. 10 minutes later, she was upstairs removing the silver pins from her hair with shaking fingers. 5 minutes after that, she climbed out through the side garden instead of walking into the hall where everyone was waiting. She did not take a bag. She did not take money. She barely remembered putting on shoes. By the time someone called her name from inside the house, Claire was already crossing the field toward Black Pine Forest. Everyone had told her she was lucky. For the first time that night, she decided luck was not enough. The field ended at the tree line, and Claire did not slow down. The first branches caught at her sleeves almost immediately, pulling at the white fabric and scattering the last silver pins from her hair. Behind her, someone shouted her name from the Bennett property. Another voice joined it. Then another. Claire kept moving. She knew those voices. Neighbors. Pack members. People who believed they were helping by returning her to the life everyone had already chosen for her. The forest floor was uneven beneath her shoes, damp from rain earlier that afternoon, and more than once she had to catch herself against a tree. She had never gone this far into Black Pine alone. Children in Silver Creek grew up hearing warnings about the deeper woods, about getting lost beyond the marked trails, and about wolves that belonged to no local pack. Claire had always listened. Tonight, fear of the forest felt smaller than fear of going back. She reached a narrow stream and stopped long enough to look behind her. Lanterns moved between the distant trees. Her chest tightened. They were closer than she expected. Claire, a man called. Come back. Nobody is angry. That almost made her laugh. Of course nobody was angry. Anger would have meant they understood she had been wronged. They thought she was confused, frightened, ungrateful. Something to be collected and returned before the ceremony became embarrassing. Claire stepped across the stones in the stream, but the hem of her dress caught beneath one shoe. She pulled free and heard fabric tear. A few minutes later, she lost the shoe entirely in a patch of deep mud. She looked back once, considered retrieving it, then heard another voice. Gavin. Claire, this has gone far enough. She froze. Even from a distance, his tone carried the same calm certainty she had heard behind the half-closed door. Not concern, not fear for her safety. Expectation. He still believed she would return because he had never imagined her refusal could be permanent. Claire turned and ran harder. Cold air burned in her lungs. Her bare foot struck wet leaves and soft earth, but she barely noticed. The trees grew thicker, forcing her away from the trail until even the lantern lights disappeared. For several minutes, there was only darkness, her breathing, and the sound of branches moving overhead. Then she realized she could no longer hear the search party. Claire slowed. That should have felt like relief. Instead, the silence reminded her that she had no plan. No money. No coat. No idea where she was. She stopped beside an enormous pine and pressed one hand against the trunk. Think, she whispered. Somewhere to her left, a twig snapped. Claire turned sharply. Nothing. She began walking again, choosing the direction that seemed to lead farther from Silver Creek. A faint mist settled between the trees. Moonlight slipped through the branches in narrow silver lines. She had gone perhaps another quarter-mile when voices returned behind her, distant but unmistakable. Claire's panic rose again. She looked over her shoulder, missed a route, recovered, and kept running. The forest opened suddenly into a narrow path. She turned onto it without thinking and collided with someone coming from the opposite direction. Strong hands caught her before she fell. Claire looked up into unfamiliar silver-gray eyes and pulled away at once. Every warning she had ever heard about unknown alphas rushed through her mind. but the words that came out were simpler than fear. "Please," she said, struggling to catch her breath. "Whatever you do, do not take me back." The stranger looked beyond her, toward the faint lights moving through the trees. Then his gaze returned to her torn white dress and mud-covered feet. He stepped aside, leaving the path open instead of blocking it. "I was not planning to," he said. Claire did not believe him. Not immediately. Trust was a luxury she had left somewhere behind her, with one muddy shoe and a house full of people waiting to celebrate a future she had never chosen. The stranger seemed to understand that without being told. He did not reach for her again. He did not step closer. He only looked toward the faint lantern glow moving between the trees and said, "There is an old ranger cabin about half a mile east. You can wait there until they pass, or you can keep running. The choice is yours." Those last 5 words stopped her more effectively than any command could have. "The choice is yours." Claire almost laughed at how unfamiliar they sounded. "Why would you help me?" she asked. The man glanced at the torn hem of her dress, then at her bare foot pressed against the cold ground. "Because you look like someone who needs a door that locks from the inside." His voice was calm, low, and strangely tired. Claire studied him. He was clearly an alpha. She could feel the quiet weight of his presence even though he made no effort to use it against her. Most powerful men filled a room by demanding attention. This one seemed to make the forest itself hold still. "And what do you want in return?" she asked. Something unreadable moved through his silver-gray eyes. "Nothing. Nobody wants nothing." "Then perhaps tonight can be unusual." A distant voice called Claire's name again, closer this time. Her decision came before her fear could argue. "Show me the cabin." The stranger nodded and turned east, but he did not walk ahead of her. He stayed beside her, matching her uneven pace through the trees. When the path became steep, he slowed without comment. When she stumbled over a root, his hand moved instinctively toward her, then stopped before touching her. Claire noticed that, too. "You can help me if I am actually falling," she said after the 3rd time. The corner of his mouth lifted. "I will remember that." "Good. You sound disappointed that I have manners." "I am suspicious of them." That earned the faintest laugh. It was brief, almost surprised, as though he had forgotten the sound of his own amusement. The cabin appeared through the mist several minutes later, small and weathered beneath the pines. One window was cracked, and the porch leaned slightly to one side, but the roof looked solid. The stranger opened the door, checked the dark interior, then stepped away from the entrance. "You first." Claire remained outside. "You keep doing that." "Doing what?" "Giving me space." His expression changed. "Not much, but enough." "Is that unusual?" Claire thought of Gavin, of her mother fastening the silver clasp, of an entire pack discussing her future as though she were not standing in the room. More than it should be. She stepped inside. The cabin smelled of cedar, cold ashes, and old rain. A narrow bed stood against one wall, with a table, 2 chairs, and a stone fireplace opposite it. The stranger found dry wood stacked in a corner and began building a fire. Claire watched him for several seconds before asking, "What is your name?" His hands paused over the kindling. "Rowan." "Just Rowan?" He looked up. "For tonight." Claire should have found that answer alarming. Instead, she sat near the growing fire and wrapped her arms around herself as warmth slowly returned to her fingers. Outside, the search voices drifted farther away. Rowan placed another log on the fire, then moved to the chair farthest from her. He did not ask who she was running from. He did not tell her what she should do next. He simply sat in the quiet and let her decide when to speak. For the first time that night, Claire understood that safety did not always feel like being protected. Sometimes it felt like being allowed to breathe. Rain began before midnight, soft at first, then steady enough to drum against the cabin roof and turn the narrow forest path into dark mud. Claire sat near the fire with a blanket around her shoulders while Rowan checked the window latch for the 2nd time. "You keep looking outside," she said. "You keep noticing." He glanced back at her. "That is not an answer. Neither was yours." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fire cracked between them, filling the cabin with the smell of cedar smoke and damp wool. Claire had expected Rowan to question her eventually. She had prepared half a dozen lies while warming her hands. He never asked. Instead, he found a small tin of oats, a few potatoes, and what might once have been dried herbs in one of the cabinets. "You are not planning to cook, are you?" Claire asked. Rowan looked at the ingredients. "That depends on how attached you are to eating." Very. Then perhaps you should lower your expectations. She watched him fill a dented pot with water and set it over the fire. His movements were confident until food became involved. 10 minutes later, the oats had become something between paste and glue. Claire stared into the pot. Rowan stared with equal suspicion. You did that on purpose, she said. Why would I do that? To make me forget I am hiding in the forest. Is it working? Claire took the wooden spoon from him. Move. He stepped aside without argument. She added more water, found salt, and rescued what remained of the meal. Rowan leaned against the table and watched her. You seem pleased with yourself. I saved dinner. That is a generous description. Claire tasted the oats and made a face. You are right. I saved us from starving. Dinner may still be beyond repair. Rowan laughed. This time, the sound lasted longer. It changed his face in a way Claire had not expected. He looked younger, less guarded. For several minutes, the cabin no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt almost ordinary. They ate near the fire while the storm deepened outside. Claire learned that Rowan hated sweet tea, could repair a broken chair in minutes, and had no idea how much salt belonged in soup. Rowan learned that Claire worked with herbs, that she preferred mornings to evenings, and that she had once ruined an entire shelf of medicine bottles by tripping over a broom she had left on the floor herself. That sounds impressive, he said. It was expensive. Even better. She tried not to smile and failed. By dawn, the rain had not stopped. Water ran from the roof in silver sheets, and the path outside had nearly disappeared beneath mud. Claire stood in the doorway and looked toward the forest. I cannot go anywhere in that. Rowan stood several feet behind her. No. She turned. You sound pleased. I am pleased that you will not break your neck on a flooded trail. That is not what I meant. His expression became carefully neutral. Then I misunderstood. Claire narrowed her eyes, but there was no point arguing with a man who had mastered the art of sounding innocent. She looked back at the rain. One night had become two without either of them deciding it. Somehow, that frightened her less than it should have. Later that morning, Rowan tried to repair the leaking roof from inside and nearly dropped a bucket on himself. Claire laughed so hard she had to sit down. He looked offended. You are enjoying this. Very much. I saved you from the forest. And I saved you from breakfast. Rowan considered that. Then I suppose we are even. Outside, the storm kept the world away. Inside, Claire found herself forgetting, one small moment at a time, that she had been running when she met him. By the second afternoon, the rain had weakened to a soft tapping against the roof, but the path outside was still too muddy to trust. Claire sat at the table sorting through a small collection of dried herbs she had found in an old cabinet while Rowan worked on the broken leg of one of the chairs. He had been silent for nearly 10 minutes, which was long enough to make her curiosity uncomfortable. You never told me your last name, she said. Rowan did not look up. You never told me yours. Claire paused. That is different. I am interested to hear why. She picked up a bundle of dried mint and inspected it as though it required her full attention. Because I asked first. Rowan smiled slightly. A powerful argument. Claire watched him tighten the wooden joint. He had given her his first name the night before, but something about the way he moved, spoke, and observed everything around him made Rowan feel incomplete. Men who lived ordinary lives did not scan every window before sitting down. They did not carry themselves like people unconsciously expected to be obeyed. They did not know how to read weather, territory markings, and distant wolf calls with such precision. Are you running from someone too? She asked. This time, Rowan stopped working. The question seemed to settle between them with more weight than she intended. Not someone, he said eventually. Then what? He looked toward the window. Mist drifted between the pines, pale against the dark trunks. Expectations, perhaps. Claire gave him a doubtful look. That sounds like something people say when they do not want to answer. It is exactly something people say when they do not want to answer. She almost laughed. At least you are honest about being dishonest. I am trying. Claire returned to the herbs, but her attention remained on him. So you are just Rowan. For now. That is suspicious. You are hiding in a forest cabin wearing a torn ceremonial dress. That is also suspicious. Then we have established common ground. Claire smiled despite herself. The strange thing was that she trusted him more because he admitted there were things he was not telling her. Gavin had always spoken as though every answer belonged to him before anyone asked the question. Rowan left doors closed and did not pretend they were open. My name is Claire, she said after a moment. Rowan looked at her. I know. Her hand stopped. What? His expression changed immediately. You told me last night. Claire searched her memory. She had been exhausted, cold, frightened. She could not remember saying it. Did I? When you fell asleep near the fire. You were talking. Heat touched her face. What else did I say? Rowan returned his attention to the chair. You criticized my cooking. That sounds believable. You also threatened to teach me how to make soup properly. That sounds generous. Extremely. Claire relaxed, but only slightly. Claire Bennett, she said. Rowan's hands became still for half a second. It was subtle, but she noticed. You know the name? She asked. He looked up. Should I? Silver Creek is not far from here. I have passed through the territory. The answer came too smoothly. Claire studied him. And your last name? Rowan leaned back in the chair he had just prepared and tested its weight. Still not available. Convenient. Very. She shook her head and returned to the herbs. Neither of them spoke about the things they were hiding after that, but the silence between them had changed. Claire had not told Rowan that the man she was running from was Gavin Mercer, one of the most influential alphas in Silver Creek. Rowan had not told Claire that he had entered these woods because reports of forced-mate agreements had reached the Royal Council. They sat only a few feet apart, both withholding the one truth that would have changed everything. Yet somehow the words they did share felt more honest than most of the conversations Claire had known her entire life. The rain stopped just before sunset, leaving the forest washed clean and strangely quiet. Claire stood near the cabin window while Rowan carried 2 damp logs beneath the porch roof. The air smelled of wet pine and cold earth, and for the first time since she had arrived, the road through the trees looked passable again. She should have felt relieved. Instead, a tightness settled beneath her ribs. The world outside the cabin had returned, and with it came every question she had managed not to answer. Rowan stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The trail should be better by morning, he said. Claire nodded without looking at him. I know. He studied her for a moment, then turned toward the fireplace. Neither of them mentioned what morning might mean. The sound of approaching footsteps reached them less than an hour later. Rowan heard it first. His entire posture changed. Not dramatically, just enough for Claire to notice the ease leave his shoulders. He moved toward the window and looked through the narrow glass. Someone is coming. Claire's hands went cold. A voice called from outside. Claire Bennett. She recognized it immediately. Thomas Hale, one of Silver Creek's senior pack officers. Another voice followed. Claire, we know you are in there. Rowan looked at her. Do you know them? Yes. Do you want to see them? The question made her turn toward him. Even now, he was asking. Not telling. Claire swallowed. I do not know. Then they can wait. A firm knock sounded against the door. Rowan did not move until Claire nodded. Only then did he open it. 3 men stood outside in travel coats marked with the Silver Creek crest. Thomas looked past Rowan and immediately found Claire. Relief crossed his face. Thank goodness. Your family has been worried sick. Claire remained near the table. I am fine. Then come home. The words were gentle, but they still sounded like an order. Thomas stepped closer to the doorway. Rowan shifted slightly, not blocking Claire, only making it clear that no one would enter without permission. We are not here for trouble, Thomas said. Rowan's expression remained calm. Neither am I. Thomas looked at Claire again. Gavin has postponed the ceremony. Everyone understands that you were overwhelmed. Claire felt something inside her sink. Overwhelmed. As though fear had made her irrational. As though leaving had been a mistake, she simply needed time to regret. I was not overwhelmed, she said. Thomas sighed. Claire, your parents need you to come back so this can be handled properly. She looked at Rowan. He did not speak for her. He did not move in front of her. He only asked one quiet question. Do you want to go? Thomas frowned. This is pack business. Rowan ignored him. His eyes stayed on Claire. Do you want to go? The answer rose before fear could stop it. No. The word was barely louder than the rainwater dripping from the roof, but the entire doorway seemed to change around it. Thomas stared at her. Claire. She straightened. I said no. Her voice was steadier this time. One of the men behind Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Thomas looked from Claire to Rowan, perhaps waiting for the stranger to correct her. Rowan did nothing. That was the point. You should think carefully, Thomas said. I have spent my whole life thinking carefully about what everyone else wants from me. Claire's fingers trembled, but she kept her hands at her sides. I am thinking about what I want now. Silence filled the porch. Finally, Thomas lowered his gaze. Your family will expect an answer soon. Then they already have one. The three men left without another word. Claire watched until the trees swallowed them. Only then did her knees feel weak. She sat down slowly beside the fire. Rowan closed the door and returned to his chair across from her. He did not congratulate her. He did not tell her she had been brave. He simply poured water into 2 cups and handed one to her. Claire wrapped both hands around the warmth. I have never done that before, she whispered. Said no? Rowan asked. She looked at the closed door. Said it, and expected people to listen. His silver-gray eyes held hers across the fire. Then perhaps they should start learning. Claire did not stop trembling when the men disappeared into the trees. The shaking only became easier to notice after the danger had passed. She sat near the fire with both hands around the cup Rowan had given her, watching steam rise between her fingers. He did not tell her to calm down. He did not fill the silence with advice. He simply added another piece of wood to the fire and waited. The quiet was almost unbearable. His name is Gavin Mercer, Claire said at last. Rowan looked up. Something in his face changed for less than a second, then settled again. The man you were supposed to return to? She nodded. My parents owe money. More than they can repay. Gavin offered to take care of the debt if I became his mate. Rowan remained still. And you agreed? Claire looked into the cup. Everyone else did. The fire cracked softly. That is not what I asked. She swallowed. No, I never agreed. Saying it aloud felt different from thinking it. Cleaner somehow. More dangerous too. They kept telling me that he was a good match. That I would be protected. That my family would be safe. Every reason was supposed to sound like love, but none of them included what I wanted. Rowan leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. Why did you run that night? Claire stared at the flames. I heard him talking about me. Her voice became quieter. He said that once everything was official, I would stop asking questions. That I would learn what was expected. Rowan's jaw tightened, but his tone stayed controlled. And that was enough. Claire looked at him. It should have been enough before that. The word surprised her. She had spent so much time trying to prove that her fear was reasonable that she had forgotten she did not need a dramatic reason to refuse a life she did not want. Rowan seemed to understand. Yes, he said. It should have been. Claire breathed slowly. Outside, water continued dripping from the roof, one steady drop at a time. What about you? She asked. You said you were running from expectations. Rowan gave a small, humorless smile. Running may have been too generous a word. Avoiding, then. That is more accurate. Claire waited. He looked toward the dark window. There are people who believe duty should answer every question before you have the chance to ask it. Claire studied him. Family, among others. And what do they expect from you? Rowan was silent long enough that she thought he would not answer. Everything. The word was simple, but something about the way he said it carried years inside it. Claire tilted her head. That sounds exhausting. A faint smile touched his face. It is. Then say no. Rowan almost laughed. You make it sound very easy. It was not easy 5 minutes ago. That silenced him. Claire took another sip of tea. It tasted bitter and slightly smoky, but she did not complain. Maybe I am not the best person to give advice, she said. I ran into a forest with one shoe. An effective strategy, apparently. Do not encourage me. I would never. She looked at him over the rim of the cup, and for a moment the heaviness in the room softened. Then Rowan's expression turned thoughtful. What if saying no changes more than your own life? Claire considered that. Then maybe the people who built everything around your yes should have asked before depending on it. Rowan looked at her as though she had said something he had never allowed himself to think. Neither of them spoke for a while after that. The firelight moved across the cabin walls, warm and uneven. Claire knew Rowan was still hiding something. She knew his silences were too practiced, his knowledge too broad, his presence too commanding for a man who was merely passing through the woods. But sitting there in the small cabin, she also knew something else. For the first time in years, she was speaking to an alpha who did not need her to become smaller so he could feel powerful. And Rowan, though she could not know it yet, was beginning to understand that the woman everyone else had tried to decide for was the first person in a long time who had spoken to him, as though he was allowed to choose too. Morning arrived with clear skies and the sharp smell of wet pine. Claire woke to the sound of horses. For one confused second, she thought Silver Creek had returned. Then she saw Rowan standing at the window, completely still. The relaxed man who had burned breakfast, repaired broken chairs, and argued with her about tea was gone. In his place stood someone colder, straighter, almost unreachable. Claire rose slowly. Rowan. He did not answer. Outside, more than a dozen riders emerged between the trees, all dressed in dark coats marked with silver insignia. Their horses stopped in perfect formation before the cabin. No one shouted. No one searched. They already knew exactly where they were going. Rowan closed his eyes briefly. Stay inside. Claire stared at him. You do not get to start giving orders now. His eyes opened. For a moment, the old Rowan returned. Tired. Almost apologetic. You are right. He reached for the door. Then come outside if you choose. Claire followed because she was done hiding from answers. The cold morning air touched her face as they stepped onto the porch. The riders dismounted at once. A tall man with dark blonde hair moved to the front. Claire recognized authority in the way the others gave him space, but even he looked at Rowan with something deeper than respect. Nathan, Rowan said quietly. The man stopped several feet away. Relief crossed his face. We have been searching for 3 days. Rowan glanced toward Claire. I am aware. Nathan's gaze followed his, and Claire saw the exact moment he understood that she did not know. His expression tightened. Your Majesty. Every rider lowered their head. Several dropped to one knee. The forest became impossibly silent. Claire could hear water falling from the cabin roof behind her. One drop, then another. She looked at Rowan. He did not seem taller than he had yesterday, but suddenly everything about him made sense. The careful way he watched every entrance. The knowledge of pack laws. The authority he carried without trying. The last name he refused to give. Your Majesty, Claire repeated. The title felt strange in her mouth. Rowan turned toward her. Claire, that is why you would not tell me. Yes. She almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Rowan what? Nathan looked away. Rowan answered himself. Rowan Blackwell. Claire knew the name. Everyone did. Alpha King Rowan Blackwell, ruler of the Northern Territories, head of the Royal Council, the man whose decisions shaped laws across every pack she had ever known. She took one step back. Rowan noticed. I was going to tell you. When he had no immediate answer. That hurt more than she expected. Claire looked at the riders, then at the cabin behind them. 2 days ago, the place had felt like the first room in her life where no one held power over her. Now she could see how foolish that had been. She had been sitting beside the most powerful alpha in the kingdom, telling him about fear and choice while he listened beneath a false name. You knew I did not know who you were, she said. I did. And you let me keep talking. Because you were talking to me. No, I was talking to Rowan. His expression tightened. That is who I am. Claire shook her head. Then why did you hide the rest? Nathan remained silent. The guards did too. No one in the clearing seemed willing to breathe. Rowan looked at her as though he wanted to cross the few feet between them, but knew better than to try. People change when they know, he said. Claire felt something cold settle where trust had been. Maybe you should have given me the chance not to. Rowan had no answer for that either. Claire stepped back toward the cabin and picked up the small bag she had packed that morning. When she returned, Rowan was still standing in the same place. Where will you go? He asked. Somewhere I choose. Claire. She stopped but did not turn around. Behind her, Nathan waited for his king. Ahead of her, the forest path was still wet from the storm. For the first time since leaving Silver Creek, Claire was not running because someone frightened her. She was walking away because trust had to mean more than kindness offered behind a hidden crown. Goodbye, Your Majesty, she said, and the title built a wall between them. Rowan returned to the royal palace before nightfall, but the place felt colder than he remembered. Servants opened doors before he reached them. Advisors waited with reports. Guards lowered their heads as he passed. Every person knew exactly who he was, and not one of them spoke to him the way Claire had when she thought he was only Rowan. He entered his private office and found Nathan waiting beside a desk covered with sealed documents. You should have told her sooner, Nathan said. Rowan removed his gloves slowly. I know. Nathan studied him, perhaps surprised by how easily the answer came. She made it back to the southern road safely. One of our scouts saw her reach the village near Cedar Hollow. Rowan nodded. He had ordered no one to follow her closely enough to make her feel watched. Even that decision felt bitterly ironic now. He had spent 2 days teaching Claire that choice mattered while keeping the most important truth about himself beyond her reach. Nathan placed a thick folder on the desk. There is something else. Rowan looked down. The seal belonged to Silver Creek. The investigation? The reports you came to Blackpine to verify. Rowan opened the folder. Several complaints had reached the Royal Council over the past year, all concerning Omega families pressured into private made agreements through debt, property arrangements, or pack influence. Most had been impossible to prove. The agreements looked voluntary on paper. This one did not. Rowan turned a page and saw the name. Claire Bennett. The room became very still. Beneath her name was Gavin Mercer's. Rowan read the document once. Then again. Where is her signature? Nathan pointed to the final page. There is not one. Then there is no agreement. That should be true. Rowan looked up. Nathan's expression was grim. Silver Creek leadership planned to complete the public ceremony first. Once she stood before the pack and accepted the announcement without formally objecting, they intended to record that as consent. Rowan felt the same cold anger he had heard beneath Claire's voice in the cabin. Everyone else had agreed. Everyone else had decided. They had built an entire future around the hope that she would be too frightened to say one word. That is not lawful, Rowan said. No. Nathan placed another paper on the desk. The Northern Council revised the mate consent statutes 11 years ago. An Omega must give clear, voluntary approval before witnesses. Family permission, debt settlement, or ceremonial silence cannot replace it. Rowan stared at the law carrying his own royal seal. Claire had run through miles of forest because the people around her had either hidden the truth or decided she would never know it. Does Gavin know? Rowan asked. He should. And Claire? Nathan shook his head. Rowan closed the folder. For a moment, he remembered her beside the fire, asking why everyone treated her future like something already decided. He remembered telling her that people should start learning to listen when she said no. Now he understood how much more that word could change. Silver Creek scheduled another ceremony for tomorrow afternoon, Nathan said. Rowan's eyes lifted sharply. Another? They are calling it a reconciliation gathering. Her family has been asked to bring her back. Rowan stood. Nathan watched him reach for his coat. What are you going to do? Rowan looked at Claire's unsigned contract one last time. He could ride into Silver Creek as Alpha King and end the arrangement with a single command. Once, he might have believed that was enough. Claire had taught him otherwise. Replacing one man's decision with another was not freedom. Rowan picked up the file. I am going to make certain they ask the only person whose answer matters. By noon the next day, Silver Creek had filled its meeting hall with flowers again. Claire stood near the back beside her parents, wearing a plain blue dress she had borrowed in Cedar Hollow. No white fabric, no silver clasp, nothing chosen for her by Gavin. Her mother had cried when Claire returned that morning, but the relief had lasted only until the pack leaders explained the ceremony had been rescheduled. They called it a chance to repair misunderstandings. Claire called it proof that no one had listened. Gavin waited near the front beneath the carved pack emblem, calm as ever, speaking quietly with the elders. When he saw Claire, he smiled as though her return meant forgiveness. I knew you would come back, he said. Claire looked at him. I came because my parents asked me to hear everyone out. His smile barely changed. That is a beginning. No, it is a sentence. Before Gavin could answer, the hall doors opened. Every conversation stopped. Rowan entered with Nathan and 4 royal guards behind him. He wore no crown, but he did not need one. The room recognized him instantly. Heads lowered. Chairs scraped against the floor. Claire remained standing exactly where she was. Rowan's eyes found hers, then moved away first. He walked to the center table and placed a folder on the wood. Gavin stepped forward. Your Majesty, this is an unexpected honor. I am not here as an honored guest. Rowan opened the folder. His voice stayed calm. I am here because this agreement is invalid. A murmur moved through the room. One of the elders frowned. The families consented. Rowan looked at him. The families are not the ones being bonded. Gavin's expression tightened. Claire understood the arrangement. Did she agree to it? Silence. Rowan lifted the final page. There is no signature. Gavin glanced toward Claire. She was nervous. Rowan's face did not change. Nervousness is not consent. Another elder stepped forward. The ceremony would have confirmed her acceptance before witnesses. Rowan closed the folder. Silence under pressure is not acceptance either. Claire felt every eye in the hall turn toward her. Once, that would have made her want to disappear. Today, she stood still. Gavin looked at Rowan with growing frustration. Then what exactly are you proposing? Rowan's gaze moved to Claire. Nothing. Gavin blinked. Rowan continued. There is no question of who she belongs to. The room became completely quiet. She belongs to no one. He stepped away from the table. Not toward Claire. Away from everyone. Leaving the space open. Ask her. Gavin stared at him. Your Majesty? Ask Claire what she wants. The words seemed almost too small for the weight they carried. Gavin turned toward her slowly. For the first time since she had known him, certainty was gone from his face. Claire, he said, do you wish to continue with the agreement? Her mother held her breath. Her father looked at the floor. The elders waited. Rowan said nothing. He did not rescue her from the answer. He did not give it for her. Claire remembered the cabin door, rain on the roof, and a simple question asked twice. Do you want to go? She looked at Gavin and felt no anger. Only clarity. No. The word crossed the hall without effort. Gavin's shoulders lowered slightly. One elder opened his mouth, but Rowan raised one hand. She answered. No one spoke again. Claire breathed in slowly. Nothing in the room had changed. The same walls. The same people. The same rules written by powerful hands. Yet for the first time, everyone had been forced to wait for her voice. Rowan gathered the unsigned papers and turned to leave. Claire watched him walk toward the doors without looking back. He had come with enough authority to claim anything he wanted. Instead, he had used it to make certain she belonged to herself. Claire watched Rowan leave the hall and realized freedom could feel almost as frightening as captivity. For so long, every road in front of her had been chosen by someone else that standing at the beginning of her own life felt like standing at the edge of a map with nothing written on it. Her parents apologized in pieces over the next several days. Her mother cried. Her father admitted that fear had made them accept promises they should never have made on Claire's behalf. Claire listened, but forgiveness did not erase what had happened. She needed distance from Silver Creek, and this time no one tried to stop her. She returned to Cedar Hollow and rented 2 small rooms above an old bakery. The front room became a herbal clinic with crooked shelves, glass jars, and a wooden sign she painted herself. The letters leaned slightly to the left. Claire decided they had character. People came slowly at first. A mother with a child who could not sleep. An elderly man with aching hands. A young Omega-2 nervous to visit the larger pack clinic. Claire listened, mixed remedies, and discovered that building a life felt different when every small decision belonged to her. 3 weeks passed before Rowan appeared. He did not arrive with guards. He did not wear royal colors. He simply walked through the clinic door in a dark traveling coat and stood awkwardly beside a basket of dried chamomile. Claire looked up from her work. Your Majesty. Rowan winced. I deserve that. Probably. He glanced around the room. You did this yourself? Mostly. The shelf near the window is being held up by Hope and one very determined nail. A faint smile appeared. I know someone who repairs chairs. Claire almost smiled back. Almost. Rowan reached into his coat and placed a small wrapped package on the counter. I brought tea. She raised an eyebrow. Sweet tea? Absolutely not. Then you still have things to learn. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, but it was careful. Rowan looked at her with the same patience he had shown in the cabin. I did not come to ask for anything. Claire nodded. Good. I wanted to know whether you were all right. I am getting there. He looked relieved, though he tried not to show it. Then I will leave you to it. Claire watched him reach the door. Rowan. He turned. It was the first time she had used his name since the forest. Something softened in his face. Thank you for what you did in Silver Creek. Rowan shook his head. You were the one who answered. You made them listen. They should have listened without me. Claire considered that. Yes, they should have. Rowan visited again 2 weeks later. Then a month after that. Sometimes he brought tea. Once he brought a new shelf after pretending not to notice the old one leaning dangerously toward the floor. He never sent jewels. Never sent invitations demanding her presence. Never asked when she would choose him. He simply appeared as Rowan whenever duty allowed and left before his presence became an expectation. Slowly, Claire began to understand that he was giving her something more difficult than rescue. Time. One evening, as they stood outside the clinic beneath a pale autumn sky, Rowan told her he would be leaving the Northern Territories for several months to negotiate with distant packs. Claire felt disappointment before she could hide it. Rowan noticed, but did not use it against her. When do you leave? She asked. 3 days. She nodded. Safe travels, Your Majesty. This time, the title sounded less like a wall and more like a reminder. Rowan gave her a small smile. Goodbye, Claire. He walked away without asking her to wait, without asking her to follow, and without knowing that for the first time in her life, Claire was about to face a choice no one else had made for her. Claire told herself for 2 days that Rowan leaving changed nothing. The clinic still opened at 8 every morning. People still came for remedies, advice, and sometimes nothing more than a quiet place to sit. The crooked shelf still leaned slightly despite Rowan's repair, and the kettle still whistled too loudly whenever Claire forgot it on the stove. Her life remained hers. That was what she had wanted. Yet on the third morning, while measuring dried lavender into small paper packets, Claire realized she had checked the clock 6 times in 20 minutes. Rowan was leaving before noon. She set the lavender down. This is ridiculous, she whispered. The empty clinic offered no opinion. Claire looked through the front window at the road leading north. For months, everyone had told her where to go. Now no one was telling her anything, and somehow that made the answer clearer. She locked the clinic, grabbed her coat, and started walking. Walking became jogging before she reached the edge of Cedar Hollow. Jogging became running when the road curved toward Black Pine Forest. By the time Claire reached the trees, her lungs burned and fallen leaves clung to her boots. The last time she had entered these woods, she had been wearing a white dress and running because fear was behind her. Today she wore a brown coat, practical boots, and no one was chasing her. She followed the old trail toward the ranger cabin until she heard horses somewhere ahead. Claire pushed through the trees and saw Rowan standing near the clearing with Nathan and several riders preparing to leave. Rowan turned at the sound of branches moving. For 1 second, he simply stared at her. Claire stopped several feet away, bent forward, and tried to breathe. Nathan looked between them and quietly led the other riders farther down the trail. Rowan waited until Claire finally stood straight. Are you all right? He asked. No, she said between breaths. I have discovered that running through forests is still a terrible idea. A smile touched his face. You could have sent a message. I considered it. And Claire looked at him. It did not feel right. The humor faded from his expression. He did not step closer. He did not assume anything. Who are you running from this time? He asked softly. The question carried her back to a rainy night. One missing shoe, and the first moment someone had offered her a choice without asking for anything in return. Claire shook her head. No one. Rowan's eyes searched hers. Then why are you here? Claire had imagined saying something graceful. Instead, the truth came out simple. Because you are leaving. I am. And I do not want you to leave without knowing that I finally made a decision. Rowan became completely still. Claire took 1 step toward him. I needed to know that I could build a life without Gavin. Without my family deciding for me. Without a king rescuing me. Rowan nodded slowly. You did. Yes. She smiled. And now I know something else. He waited. Claire moved closer until only a few feet remained between them. I choose the clinic. I choose my work. I choose my own ridiculous shelves. Rowan almost smiled. A strong list. I am not finished. His expression softened. Claire held out her hand. I choose you too. Not because you are the Alpha King. Honestly, that part is still inconvenient. Rowan laughed quietly. I can imagine. I choose Rowan. For the first time, the man who always seemed to know what to say had no words. He looked at her hand, then at her face. Are you certain? Claire smiled through the tightness in her throat. You really do ask a lot of questions for a king. This answer matters. Then yes, I am certain. Rowan placed his hand in hers, gently, without pulling her closer. Claire closed the remaining distance herself. Around them, Black Pine Forest stood quiet beneath the morning light. The first time Claire had run into Rowan, she had nowhere else to go. This time, no one followed her, no one commanded her, and no one had chosen the road beneath her feet. She had run toward him because, at last, she knew exactly where she wanted to be.